Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
We're looking at now the Monday, Thursday Tachanun. So Tachanun, the Talmud says after the person finishes their required prayer, the Amidah, you don't dash off. You add some personal words, and this somehow idea sort of exploded into Tachanun, penitential prayers. And we know that there were various things that were different about Monday and Thursday, going back to Talmudic times. They apparently were market days. People came from villages to the larger towns to market. That's probably why Torah reading was added on those specific days. So there's Torah reading. And there then, because there was communal gathering, there evolved other things that were said on Monday, Thursday that were not said on other days. And this is what we call the expanded Tachanun. And we know, because I said that Sephardim and thus Hasidim also include in Tachanun every day, not in the expanded Tachanun, but every day, Ashamnu, penitential prayers, also Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum V'Chanun, right, the description of God's 13 attributes of mercy, which goes back to, Exodus, what God taught Moshe to say after the sin of the golden calf, which midrashically God says, whenever it seems like I'm angry, Bnei Israel should say this phrase to remind me of my attributes of mercy, and I'll calm down. So that we find is familiar to most of us Ashkenazim from Slichot, right? But Sephardim and Hasidim add that every day. And over time, there developed extra stuff that was said Monday and Thursday. I thought, oh my God, it's going to be so horrible to try to get through the 7-paragraph Tachanun. And that's because I generally daven from a traditional Siddur, and I did not realize that our contemporary conservative Siddurim have already gotten rid of most of the 7-paragraph Tachanun for us. So I'm on page 128 in the little fat Sim Shalom, 59 in the Slim Shalom. In looking over this yesterday carefully, I noticed that actually even these two versions of the conservative Siddur are somewhat different from each other. Okay? So I guess I would say, by way of introduction, and I'll try to say it by way of conclusion, that since Tachanun is in its very nature a non-statutory prayer, meaning not exactly required by classical halacha, it does not have a bracha formulation, Baruch Atah Hashem, you should do for Tachanun whatever you find meaningful as a supplication. So whether that means you add these things or Monday, Thursday, or you add your own thing, or whatever you choose to do, I guess I'll say that. So in the classical traditional Siddur, Tachanun is 7 paragraphs long, although in the Sack Siddur, it's somehow divided into 8 paragraphs. I don't think they have an extra paragraph. I think they divided one of the 7 into 8. There are various, this was added in the early Middle Ages. There are various legends about it. One legend is that there were a group of rabbis and they were shipwrecked, and they were so grateful that the Hashem caused a miracle to rescue them from this shipwreck, and they survived, that they composed this extra part of Tachanun. So this extra part of Tachanun is not in the earliest Siddurim, 800-ish. It's added later. And by the way, Sephardim also have an expanded Monday, Thursday Tachanun, but theirs is different. There's some overlap with the Ashkenazi expanded Tachanun, and there's some non-overlap, so it's not identical. So I'm going to refer to this as the 7-paragraph Tachanun, even though in our conservative Siddur, it's actually 5. Everyone with me? Okay. By the way, the traditional 7-paragraph Tachanun, unlike some of what we're going to find in the conservative Tachanun, is all singular. Sorry, it's all plural. It's all communal. So in Tachanun, the only thing that we've seen is singular is the Psalm 6, right, written in the first person. Everything else is in the plural. The entire expanded Tachanun is in the plural, except we'll see our conservative Siddur introduced a paragraph that was not originally there as one of the alternatives, and that is in the singular, right? But traditionally, everything is in the plural. And what our Siddur has done, our conservative Siddur, is, and if you're in a traditional Siddur, you're just not going to be able to follow this, is that our conservative Siddur, by giving it numerals 1 through 5 in one edition, Roman numerals, or Aleph through Hey in the other edition, has set it up as these are alternatives. And even you have that instruction. On Monday and Thursday, start with one or more of the passages. And, right, so our conservative Siddur has already recognized in its instructions that this is really, really long, that to give people time to say everything would take a lot of extra time. I think the de facto assumption is that there will be some super speed daveners who will feel moved or obligated to go through all of it, right? Whereas other people will say one or more of the following selections. In the original traditional Tachanun, that's not how it is. It's you say all of it. And by the way, this part of Tachanun is said standing traditionally. I think I'm not sure we observe that punctiliously at Temple Beth Am in Morning Minyan. But the opening extra Monday, Thursday section traditionally is said standing, and then you sit down for Vayomer David El Gad when you go down on your hand. That's on your arm. That's when you actually sit down. But the opening part is standing. I'm not sure I know what the history of that is exactly. Maybe because the opening part traditionally in some Siddurim also had Ashamnu with it. Don't know. Okay, but traditionally it said standing. And we're going to take a look at these 5 passages. Ilana, you have a question?
Just a question about the numbering, Taya.
Yes.
Okay, so you're making a distinction between 5 paragraphs, I understand, Aleph through Hey, and 7 paragraphs.
So if you look at a traditional Siddur, the expanded Monday, Thursday Tachanun is in fact 7 paragraphs long.
So you're saying that the expanded version, that is the portion, the expanded portion, only for Monday and Thursday.
Monday, Thursday.
7 paragraphs.
Yeah, say it again. The expanded portion. I didn't hear the end of your question.
Okay, so the 7 paragraphs you're describing
is the Monday, Thursday expanded Tachanun.
Just the expansion.
Yeah,
right?
Before Vayomer David El Gad.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's 5 paragraphs versus 7 paragraphs.
But they're different paragraphs.
Mm-hmm. That was being prior to
Vayomer David El Gad. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So the expanded first portion of Tachanun, which is 7 paragraphs in the traditional Siddur, in our conservative Siddur is 5 paragraphs, but they're not the same paragraphs. And it's also been changed to, some of them are the same and some of them are not. We're going to go over that in a moment. And it's been also changed to, you may pick one of these selections, okay, as alternatives.
So we have 5, but of those 5, they're not all from the traditional.
Correct. 7. We're going to go ahead and look at them. Okay. So paragraph 1. So what that means is, if you are studying at the moment from only a traditional Siddur and you do not have one of the conservative Siddurim in front of you, you will now, starting at this moment forward, be slightly lost in the discussion. So for those who are listening online from far away and only have a traditional Siddur, I'm sorry, this is following the conservative Siddur from here on in. Okay, so I'm on page 128 or page 59. So paragraph 1, that which is labeled Roman numeral 1 or Aleph, and not even paragraph 2. Wow. Okay. Could I just have a question? The people who are here, please look at me and raise your hand. If you're on camera. How many people have the slim shalom? Raise your hand. All right. And how many people have the big sim shalom? Raise your hand. Okay. So right away we're confused. So paragraph 1 or Aleph is in fact is the opening of the traditional 7-paragraph Tachanun. Okay. So I want everyone to take a moment and I'm going to give you a minute to just skim through that paragraph, and then I'm going to say, tell me what it's about. Okay? Just pause, have a look. Alan, I'll come to your question in a little bit, not yet. Alan, ask your question now, and I'll tell you if I want to deal with it now.
It's not a question. It was just raising my hand regarding the something else. It's moot.
Okay, moot. Okay. So everyone take a look at 1. All right, could someone give me a summary of what paragraph 1 is about in 1 sentence?
We invoke God's compassion to forgive us even though we don't merit it.
Good. We sin, God please be merciful. We sin, semicolon. God please be merciful. Fair enough? It's a reasonable, right?
And it's not only God please be merciful, but there's an assertion that God is merciful. Or
yes, God is merciful, and we need your mercy because we are sinful, right? Sorry to sound a little Christian about it, but that's what it basically says. We sin, God, we rely on your merciful nature, okay? And that is the opening of the traditional 7-paragraph Tachanun also. So both editions of the conservative Siddur preserve that. Okay. Before I go on to paragraph 2, I will digress. Vehu rachum. This is the opening line. God is compassionate. Vehu rachum yichaper v'lo yashchit. God is compassionate. This is a quote from the Bible, one of the prophets. God is compassionate. He forgives sin rather than destroying. Right? Because if God didn't forgive sin, God would punish and therefore destroy. Right? V'hir bala shivapo. He abundantly holds back God abundantly holds back God's anger. V'lo ya'ir kol chamato, and does not stir up all of God's anger. Okay? Rachum, I want to digress on the word rachum. So rachum, you could translate it as merciful or compassionate or something like that. We're not going to get too hung up on the moment about merciful versus compassionate or whatever, but obviously it has to do with the word rachamim, that God has rachamim. So rachum means God is infused with or full of rachamim. Is that a fair statement? Hold on, Vered. Right? Everyone sort of agree with me? Rachum means God is full of rachamim. A parallel word which we frequently use is chanun, right? Which means God is full of mercy or something like that, right? The word being lichonein or chanina, which means forgiveness or mercifulness or something like that. So this helps us understand. I'm going to left field now for a moment. This helps us understand the word baruch. So there is a common misconception that the word baruch means God is blessed, right? Because in Hebrew, the form pa'ul frequently or usually means the passive. Amur means it is said. Shamur means it is guarded. Katuv means it is written. So Baruch should mean it is blessed. God is blessed, which leads us to this theological question that everyone always asks, which is what? We bless God. God needs our blessing. So in fact, that's probably not what Baruch means. There's a different meaning of the Pa'ul form, And that meaning is infused with or full of. Because rachum does not mean God is treated with compassion, right? It's not a passive. So amur, shamur, and katuv are all passive, right? Which leads people to think Baruch is passive, God is blessed, which implies that we're the ones who bless God, right? But there's another use of the pa'ul which is not passive. It means full of or infused with. So rachum does not mean God is acted mercifully upon in the passive voice. It means God is filled with rachamim. Tachanun does not mean we are gracious to God. Okay. It means God is filled with chanina, graciousness. So Baruch probably really means God is filled with blessing. So that understanding that it's not the passive pa'ul, but rather the pa'ul which means full of or infused with, actually changes it from the passive to the active. So in that understanding of the word Baruch, it doesn't mean blessed art thou, which implies we bless God, which implies we are the active ones and God is the passive one. Rather, Baruch means one who is infused with blessing, meaning it makes God the source of blessing for us rather than the recipient of our blessings. I'm going to say that last line again because that's the take home. Baruch, if Baruch is understood to be like a grammatical construction, like rachum or chanun, then it doesn't mean passive recipient of X. It actually means source of X, which is totally the opposite. Okay? So Baruch atah Hashem probably means full of blessing are you, God, ruler of the universe, rather than blessed are you. Did everyone follow that? If you didn't follow it, raise your hand right now.
Oh.
Yeah, Alan, unmute.
Can you say this one? Because this is a fundamental change in how we view prayer.
Yes.
I'd like to hear it one more time so it really sinks in.
Baruch means full of or infused with blessing, the source of blessing, just like rachum means that God is the source of rachamim. Chanun means God is the source of chen or chanina. She's still here. Vered, are you still there? Vered, when you come back, can you think of any other pa'ul words that are like rachum v'chanun, meaning they don't mean passive voice, they mean fullness of? I'm not sure I can think of any, because that's not how it's used in modern Hebrew, by the way. In modern Hebrew, it would just be the passive voice. Katuv means it is written. Baruch means it is blessed or he is blessed. Okay? And when we say in 2 days, at the end of Shoshana Yaakov, Arur Haman, Asher Bikesh La'abdi, Baruch Mordechai, HaYehudi, cursed is Haman, and blessed is Mordechai. We are definitely saying Baruch in the passive voice. We are saying, we bless Mordechai. Okay? But it is entirely possible, and there are many modern writers who say this, that Baruch Atah Hashem does not mean blessed are you, God, but rather full of blessing are you, God. Meaning, the Baruch Atah Hashem formula is declaring God is the source of blessing rather than God is the recipient of our blessing. Now, that might or might not be the pshat. Okay? Some people say that is the pshat of what Baruch Atah Hashem. Other people say, no. Levarech means to sort of bless in the sense of like to praise or acknowledge. And Baruch Atah Hashem really means we praise you, O God. We acknowledge you, O God. It definitely doesn't mean we bless you, O God. Right? It definitely does not mean like, oh Hashem, I'm going to give you a bracha. Okay? in the simple sense that we say, I'm going to give you a blessing. So in Pshat, it might mean, if Baruch is the traditional passive, it might mean praised are you. That would be a much better translation than blessed are you. Or it might be interpreted as like Rachum, not the passive voice at all, but rather the use of the Pa'ul form, which means full of, which then means source of, right? In Rachum, if I'm saying Rachum, God is Rachum, what am I saying? Am I saying I have compassion on God? Or am I saying God is full of compassion, infused with compassion, and therefore the source of compassion? Analogously, in Baruch, I might be saying God is the source of blessing, infused with blessing, the one who bestows blessing. Just like God is the one who bestows rachamim or chanina.
I want to add something.
Alan, then Vered.
Okay. Is there a source that deals with this? Because I've never heard this, and it's absolutely fascinating to me.
That's because you didn't listen to our Birchot HaShachar classes, Alan. You were absent. Okay. You go back and listen to the very, very beginning. There's some lesson on the bracha formulation. Okay. And when we talked about it, so that's fine. But yes, right. But I didn't make it up, just so you know.
No. I know you didn't make it up.
I never make anything up. Yeah.
All right. God forbid, forbid you should do that. But just, is there like in the Talmud or in some association about a discussion about Baruch somewhere that deals with this? Or
well, that's a great question. Or I'm gonna frame your question differently. The question is there someone who of the classical commentators earlier than some hippie people in the 1970s in America who says that that's what Baruch means? I am sure there are. I don't know, and I will work on that. That will be my homework assignment. What do we have? I'm going to put it in air quotes, traditional Jewish sources who interpret Baruch that way. I'm sure we do. I'd have to hunt it down. And how early does it go back? And is that what classical rabbinic thinking in the Talmud thought it meant? Is a good question. Okay. I'll work on that.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you.
Yeah. Michael O. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I said Vered. Vered, then Michael. Vered, then both Michaels. All right.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to get hung up on it. All right. Go ahead.
Boker Tov.
Yeah.
I have a quick, actually two comments.
Okay.
One is about the word Baruch, Tachanun, Rachum.
Yes.
Those verbs are coming from Binyan Piel, and the classic Pa'ul form exists only in Binyan Pa'al. So when you go to
right.
Ketuv
Pause. Hold on. Let me go before you on. So in other words, what Vered is saying, if I can get rid of the grammatical terms, is Rachum comes from lirachem, would be the verb, and lichanein, which might be lichonein, I don't know.
Lechonen.
Yeah.
Lechonen.
Which mean, and that fits with barech, because it's livarech. We don't say, when we bless someone, we don't say livroch, we say livarech.
Right.
Go ahead, Vera.
So what it means that all the Pa'ul, the normal Pa'ul are coming from Pa'al, and everything that looks like Pa'ul but comes from a different binyan, which actually is only Piel extra, then they do not have the meaning of a passive.
Yeah.
They have a different meaning, like we explained now, full of mercy.
Good.
Full of compassion, or a source of compassion. It is not translated as a passive form.
Yes. Good. Todah. Vered, your homework assignment is, can you find or come up with other examples of that other than Rachum, Tachanun, and Baruch? Are there any other PLs that mimic like the Kal passive that are really not passive?
They're not passive.
Because that's a very, very interesting question for those of us who know enough Hebrew to be nerdy enough to want to know the answer. Okay.
And I had another quick comment.
Okay, please.
That the word rachamim, the noun rachamim, in my mind, I often relate it to the word rechem, womb.
Yes.
And we talked about kind of translated into motherly compassion or a lot of compassion that is not just compassion, but it's a little bit extra compassion.
Deeper. Yes, correct.
Deeper.
Correct. Thank you. I will say one or two sentences about that, which is a very short version of a much longer topic. In the great bloodbath battles over monotheism versus polytheism in the 800s, 700s, and 600s BCE, which we read about in the Book of Kings and in the literary prophets, and there were bloodbaths back and forth. When the monotheists won out, part of monotheism was all of the functions of all of the different gods got collapsed into the one God. So there was no longer a war god and a fertility god and something else god. They all were folded into the one deity. That deity was conceived of as male because our ancestors of over 2.5 millennia ago were simply not philosophically capable of conceiving of a deity that was non-gendered. That's a modern thing, right? So we can't fault them. We can't fault them for that. It wasn't on their radar screen yet. They assumed that that deity was male rather than female. We might choose to fault them for that, okay? And so all of the functions of all the other gods got collapsed or telescoped, I don't know, collapsed, loaded into the one deity. The irony then becoming the masculine one deity then became responsible for certain kinds of functions that had in the past been responsibility of the female deities, such as fertility. Female deities is a fancy way of saying goddesses, such as fertility. So then we have the quirk where we end up saying Hashem is responsible for fertility, right? Which we read about everywhere in the Torah, right? And then we have the linguistic quirk where we end up saying God treats us with rachamim, which means womb feeling. That's what rachamim means. It means the feeling or emotion that only a mother can have. Sorry, being sexist. I'm just telling you what it says. I didn't make it up. Okay? Rachamim means the kind of feeling that only a mother can have because towards what is implied in all that, towards an offspring because she carried that offspring around in her womb. Okay? That's what generates that kind of feeling, which is kind of why most of the time, you know, the world has changed somewhat, but still most of the time when little kids fall and they cry, they say, mommy, usually. Okay? Still, right? So,
Avi.
Hold on. So I can tell I'm getting myself in hot water here, but hold on. Okay? So we have the male deity has womb feeling. So I just want to say it a little bit stronger than what Vered said. And we, because we've been reading it for over 2.5 millennia in the Torah, we just sort of take that for granted. God has compassion. Hashem has rachamim. But I don't want you to take for granted how odd that locution is. And I want us to recognize that that locution is the product of a very complicated evolution of people's thinking, or our ancestors' thinking about God. Okay. Larry felt the need to jump in.
I just felt the need to change my picture so that you could all see
the offspring.
Skipping a generation.
Yes.
How males nonetheless can feel that very feminine, maybe what is perceived to be a feminine feeling of wombness, of taking care of the offspring.
Yes. Thank you for you're correct. And of course, I just want to point out that, Hashem feels rachamim, meaning the deity who's conceived of as, in other places, as he's an old man with a white beard, like in the book of Daniel, who sits on a throne, and the books are brought to him and opened up, and everyone's decree is there, right? That old man, white beard God has womb feeling. Okay. And that's kind of the theology that was left to us by this, hundreds and hundreds of years of evolution. Okay. That was a long digression about Rachum, Chanun, Baruch. Okay. We're not going to go further in Tachanun today than the first paragraph. So I'll pause for comments. Michael O, then Michael H, then Ilana. Michael O.
Rabbi, I thought this is very, very fascinating. I really appreciate how you frame this. I also think that what it does is it turns, it's another reminder that God doesn't need our prayer. It's
the whole Baruch thing, correct.
And it's an actively something above us actively full of compassion, then it's our job to bring that into this world. And I also think that it relates back to Parsha Vayikra last Shabbat, because of the idea of humans drawing near to God at the Mishkan is this idea of love, and so so it could be seen as feminine.
Or could be seen. Yes, right. Yeah. Although Larry would disagree with you about that. Grandpa Larry would disagree with you about that.
Feminine or masculine. Right. I'm not going to get. Right. I don't want to get in an argument.
By the way, for sure, blessed are you for Baruch Hashem is the worst possible translation. It is the most misunderstood. It could be, if it really is a traditional passive, it's more something like Baruch in the same, in the sense of acknowledge or praise. Praised are you, if you want to keep it in the traditional passive, is a much better translation, which makes much more sense theologically than blessed are you. Blessed are you means, it is sort of the least the least good understanding of what that line means. I understand that it's traditional, and I understand that I am criticizing it. Yes, that is correct. So it might be full of blessing, that which might not be the pshat, but if the pshat is passive, it really means praised are you. And livarech, it's the word that's used when Jacob came to see Pharaoh, right? The first thing he says, he probably doesn't bless Pharaoh. He probably comes in and says, "Oh, great Pharaoh," or something. "I am pleased to meet you. I am honored to meet you," or something like that. Meaning it's a locution that means to praise and acknowledge, not "I'm going to give you a bracha," which implies that I have something that you will benefit from and I will bestow it upon you. That's probably the most egregious misunderstanding of it. Okay, Michael H., I held you off.
That's okay. It occurred to me that even if we translate it as blessed or praised, that it may not be suggesting that we have power to do that.
Yeah.
It may simply be reciting what we know from the Torah or believe from the prophets, that the celestial beings, the angels, are in fact doing that. For example, we mimic that when we do the Kedusha and say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. About God. So we're not really saying that even if we translate it in the standard ways, we're not necessarily saying that we are blessing God, but rather acknowledging that the other celestial
beings. What are the celestial beings doing, Michael? I want to argue with you on that. They're praising God. That's my argument. They're not blessing in the sense that we in English mean blessing. Okay. By the way, that raises the question of what is Baruch Kivod Hashem Mi Makomo, which regardless of what Baruch means, is a hard phrase to translate. Okay. I don't want to get into that right now. But at any rate, I'm fine with you saying we imitate the celestial beings, but I still think that what they do is they praise rather than blessing in our common English sense of the word blessing. Okay. Ilana.
Two little things. One is, I still don't understand the distinction between bless and praise. Why is that an important distinction? And my second question has to do with, if traditionally God is conceived of as male, isn't gender a human and I guess biological quality which would go against the idea of God transcending those characteristics, right? I mean,
I don't think people in the year 800 BCE had any thought about God transcends those characteristics.
Is that more like later in commentaries, like Maimonides?
I mean, and look in the Talmud, by the way, you could even say, I think, I mean, I don't know, you'd have to delve, I don't know that the Talmud says he is neither masculine nor feminine, but possesses masculine and feminine qualities. The Zohar says that, by the way, and the Zohar also doesn't say, Kabbalah doesn't say God transcends these qualities. It says God has masculine and feminine qualities that need to be united rather than be separated.
Right.
It's still gendered internally. Okay. I think the idea of a God beyond gender, you'd have to, it's another hard question, which I will not accept as my homework. Anyone else can, which is where are the first Jewish thinkers who say God is beyond gender entirely? And all gendered language is a human metaphor and therefore a falsehood because of course God is beyond gender.
And I
just want to say, I think I think framing it that way, I think is a modern way of thinking. I don't even know if so I don't know. I mean, Maimonides says everything we say about God is a metaphor and God is pure intelligence. So I guess you'd say, well, Rambam would say God is beyond gender. But I don't think Rambam takes the next, I don't think Rambam still ever takes the next step and says, therefore, the word who, H Vav Aleph, meaning he, H-E, is a meaningless word to use.
Right. I mean, I guess if I remember correctly, there's, and again, this now that you mention it, it is later, but a kind of prohibition against anthropomorphism, really.
Right, but
in conceiving of God.
There's a prohibition that's in anthropomorphism in art. I just want to say, I think anthropomorphism is everywhere on every page of the Chumash and the Siddur.
Right, and so it almost seems like I didn't think that it was really strictly in art. I thought I think this is right. Maimonides says that.
Ilana, right, Maimonides, but everyone thought he was wrong. Not everyone. It says, Ilana, it says, Adonai ish milchama. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is a man of war. We say that in Shirat Hayam every single morning. Okay? So, Maimonides says God is totally abstract. And everything we say about God is a metaphor, and you simple regular people can't really conceive of it that way. Okay? The simple regular people couldn't conceive of it that way. Right? Right? So this idea that God is the framing of it.
Right.
I mean, yes, Rambam would certainly say God is beyond gender and transcends gender. Absolutely. But Rambam, as far as I know, didn't write about, and because everything we say about God is a metaphor, sometimes we use male characteristics and sometimes we use female characteristics. I don't think he went there as far as I know. But
okay.
I'm happy to give this to anyone as an assignment. You can go study Jewish philosophy and figure out who says beyond gender.
If they do. I don't understand your distinction between bless and praise, but
okay. Praise means Ilana, you are great. And bless means Ilana, I am giving you a blessing. Right?
Now that I really think about this, I don't think I really understand what blessing is in any language, and maybe that's my homework.
Okay, but just let's get basic. Think about the Torah. Think about the Tochecha in the rewards and punishment, and in the end of Leviticus and the end of Deuteronomy. It says, if you obey the commandments and do good, Baruch atah ba'ir u'baruch atah basadeh. God, you will be blessed in your domestic life. You'll be blessed in your farming life. Your animals will not miscarry. You will have abundant grain and water. It means God is going to do something good for you. He is going to bestow some quality of blessing in all your endeavors.
Okay.
It's something that one side is granting to the other side.
Okay.
It has a directionality to it.
Okay.
I have something, I'm God, I have something that you need, fertility for your flocks. If you keep the commandments, I will bestow fertility on your flocks. I think that's what it means in Vayikra and Deuteronomy.
Okay.
Right? So again, I have something that you need. I have the power to give it to you or not, right? Because we have the other side, right? If you do not keep the commandments, then your flocks will miscarry and the heavens will close up and there will not be rain and your enemies will, and this is arur, cursed.
Mm.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So yes, by the way, it's deeper than that. Sarich Iyun, one could talk about it more, but that's sort of the start of it. Right?
Thanks.
As opposed to praised, which is, wow, God, you really are great. You made the sun come. Wow, God, sovereign of the universe, you are great. You made the sun come up. You create light and darkness, which is different than, I'll grant you we could discuss about what it means, but it's still different than blessed are you, God, because you create light and darkness.
Okay.
And it may be that this is more of a problem in English than in Hebrew.
I was wondering about
but
that.
I could contend even in the Hebrew, if you're talking about the blessings and the curses at the end of Leviticus or the end of Deuteronomy, God will send you blessings or curses, depending on what you do. But again, it's God who is putting that thing, that outcome on you. God has control of it. God is bestowing it. We are the recipients of God's favor or disfavor. There is a vector of that and an asymmetry and a hierarchy. That's my point about the blessing.
And your comment about wondering what it is in English, if that's the problem, I'm wondering if in the traditional, sort of original setting, people obviously didn't pray in their vernacular, right? So the whole issue of what it means in another language is moot.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Right. Right. Anytime we're translating, we're sort of saying what we're trying to translate it into English. But the more core or value-laden word, the more core concept or value-laden a word is, the harder it is to translate it from one language to another by definition.
Right.
Okay. I'm sorry, there's still hands up, but I've got to call time. It's 9:00. Hold on to it to next time. And next time we'll return to the long Tachanun. Larry, what's the grandchild's name? Remind me.
Millie or Amelia or Amalia Vered.
Ah.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Amalia, Millie. Okay. Everyone have a good day. Have a joyous Purim. And God willing, we'll see each other next week.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.